Hello friends, this is Chad, also known as Modern Kutuzov, and welcome to Continuing Clockwise. This is a YouTube channel about games, gamers, and gaming. Fun stuff, right? For this, what I'm calling episode 0, I'm going to talk mostly about my history in games. It's fairly long, so I won't go into much detail just yet. And then we'll talk a little bit about what I want to do with this channel. So my gaming history started back in grade school. I remember I was riding the bus. I grew up in a rural community in eastern Washington. And so we had these long bus rides that probably to adults weren't that long, but felt forever to me. And one of the high school kids, his name is Al Willett. So if you're out there, Al, thank you for introducing me to the hobby. He had copies of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. I think it was Monster Manual 2 and Fiend Folio and the Dungeon Master's Guide. And he specifically showed us, I don't even know what inspired him to do this, but showed us the artifact section of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Let us kind of look through those sections of those books. And it just blew our minds. So, I was a science fiction kid, fantasy kid, mythology kid, of course, even before that. So it really was something I was waiting for and didn't even know it. So that was my first introduction, just looking at those books. And then slowly, kind of over the next year and a half, 2 years, fourth, fifth grade is when I think somewhere in there I got Redbox, patterned after the one you see behind me. That's the 4th edition version, but it was the one that looked like that for Dungeons and Dragons, not Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It was just Dungeons and Dragons, which I was very confused about. My friends and I did not understand that these were different games for quite a while. I remember going through them. And it was specifically the elf. So the elf has spells and can use weapons in Dungeons and Dragons, but you have to multi-class to do that in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I realized, just put those two things together around that time period. I was like, hey, these are different. These are different games. It was a breakthrough for me. So it was all this kind of great period of kind of learning and didn't really understand what was happening, but knew that it was good stuff. And then in the 7th grade is when I really found my people, my gamer people. These are friends who I am still in touch with, or still friendships that have lasted forever. So that's where the group formed, and we had advanced D&D books. We had a lot of games, though, through that period. Yes, D&D was part of it, but it was only one section. So we also had Marvel Superheroes, which was a real interest. We were comic book kids, and so Marvel Superheroes was a really good game, and I still have some bits and pieces of that around. The Palladium system, so it had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where you could create mutant animals and be superheroes around that. We for some reason were obsessed with the TMNT, and I have that book here too. Maybe another time we'll talk about that. That was super fun. So Traveler was also the science fiction game. Star Wars, the West End Games version of Star Wars with D6s. And we were also board game kids. And, in video games, especially the Ultima series, was something I was super interested in. That was the era of Ultima 4 and Ultima 5. Ultima 3 a little bit, and spent so many hours, especially with Ultima 4. That was really something that impacted me really very strongly. Pool of Radiance, which I think might have been the first officially licensed Dungeons & Dragons game. So I got that for my Commodore 64. Again, this is the 80s. All of these were for the Commodore 64, in my house anyway. That was just the computer that we had. The thing about my group at that time, though, was that we made a lot of characters. So we would get the games, one of us would take an interest, we would think of this campaign we wanted to run for our friends, and we would all make characters, and then we might play it once or twice, or not at all. We have characters that never saw the light of day as far as playing. That was just kind of the way we rolled. That was the way our attention span rolled. We had great plans, but then when we got together on the weekends and had sleepovers, we were out playing in the woods and running around and watching movies and playing video games. We actually didn't do a whole lot of actual playing of these games, even though we talked about it and we made so many characters, and I still have a lot of those. So then graduated high school. I joined the Army I had one enlistment in the Army, dabbled a little bit in some games, but at that time, the unit I was with didn't have a big gaming, culture. So we played, here and there. When I was visiting my friends, we would play, usually board games. Bought a computer for college and only allowed myself one video game, so I bought Dark Forces. That's a first-person Star Wars shooter. Played that endlessly. That was Kyle Katarn was the character. A few years later, I bought Baldur's Gate 2, which was huge. Played that endlessly as well. So much Baldur's Gate 2. Magic the Gathering was fairly new at the time. Was actually probably very new at the time, and I dabbled in that. Not a whole lot. I was never really a collectible card game person, but there was just a time where Magic was the thing. and everybody played Magic. So eventually life rolled on. Still kept in touch with almost all of those friends from high school, and when we got together, we would game. Then eventually I was like, I really want to get into a game. You know, I'm an adult now. I've got my life together mostly, and so I started scouring Craigslist, you know, for a game that sounded good, and I found one. It was an ad for Mage the Ascension. Was the game, the White Wolf game. So I answered the ad and found a group and learned the system, and really at that point I had been out of role-playing games for years, really. I never played Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, missed out the second part of 2nd edition. So this was new. I'm still in touch with one of those players. He's in my current campaign. I think the campaign actually ended, and so we were playing some other games, some indie games at the time, which was super fun. Fast forward-ish to 2008, and that's when Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition came out, and I knew it was time. I wanted to play D&D again. I went on meetup.com. So in 2006, it was Craigslist. In 2008, it was meetup.com. And found a group, and we just met. I was a dungeon master who bought the books, and most of us were about the same age, and, you know, kind of settled and wanted to get back into gaming. There was some variety there, but that was close to our story anyhow. So we went and showed up in this guy's basement and started a campaign. It was a long-term 4th edition campaign. He DM'd most weeks. We went through from first level until, you know, I don't even know. And as I remember, that game went to level 30, I think. And I'll have to look at that. It's been a few years since I've really played 4th edition. Anyway, we played up into epic tier, for sure, over a period of years. And after about a year of playing, I started to my own campaign about once a month. That's kind of where I have the capacity. The thing about 4th edition, if you know the system, is that it's really combat heavy. It's really a skirmisher miniatures game with role-playing also built in. I don't want to diss on 4th edition. I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed it a lot, but by the end, I was burned out as a DM, especially. Some of those combats, especially for high level, would just take hours and hours and hours, and I'd had enough. So I wrapped up my campaign. It came to its natural conclusion. D&D Next was in full swing. Quick history was that after 4th edition, Wizards of the Coast did an extensive playtest of 5th edition, and they called it D&D Next. So I didn't really engage with that a lot. I was kind of done with Dungeons & Dragons for a little while. Though near the end, another one of my friends started a campaign and used those rules, and then eventually used 5th edition rules once those came out. We were just mostly doing board games for several months. When 5th came out, I was really excited. The day the starter set came out, I found it, found a shop that had it. I had this kind of event coming up that I volunteered to DM some Dungeons & Dragons. Not much time to learn the starter set, the game, the module. We only got through the first dungeon or so. When the Player's Handbook came out, that came out the same day as the first adventure, so Hoard of the Dragon Queen. So all I could find was modules. So I bought that before I had the Player's Handbook, complained on Facebook, and then a friend of mine was like, I saw a bunch of them at Meeple's, actually, in West Seattle. So Meeple's is a great store. It's still there. You should go there. It's a great place. So Saturday morning, I drove over there, and they did have some copies in stock. So I bought my Player's Handbook there. It was very exciting. Shortly thereafter, I started my campaign, my 5th edition campaign. That was 3.5 years ago. There's been some player rotation, but it's been continuous. We play about once a month, pretty high level. I can see the end of this campaign. There's a kind of a natural narrative ending coming, and so that'll be good. Because I could kind of use a break. I have ideas already for what's next. I play in a group right now that meets a couple times a month. Depends. Schedule's tough, for adults with responsibilities, with families and jobs and things. So that's my gaming history. Kind of takes it up to the current. I do want to talk a little bit about my general inspirations, as by way of introduction. I'm a huge fan of Battlestar Galactica, especially the series from the 2000s, early 2000s. Loved it. Played the board game a lot, so I really love that tone. We're big fans of Walking Dead. Same thing. It's the tone, the adventure, the excitement. Love that kind of pressure. I don't know that I'm very successful at bringing that feel to my games, but that's something I aimed for. And these days, I'm especially inspired by sword and sorcery. So the Conan the Barbarian, fairly low magic. Magic is weird, kind of creepy feel. I really am adoring playing in the Curse of Strahd campaign that my friend is running. And like everyone else, I'm a Star Wars fan. You can see. Recently got back into the X-Wing miniatures game. That's a lot of fun. I've loved Star Wars my whole life, and then also the Lord of the Rings, of course, is so much fun. Game of Thrones is so much fun. So all that kind of geek stuff I love and adore. So that's what really informs a lot of my thing, and we'll talk about a lot more of my influences in future episodes and kind of dig into what that looks like and what that means to me and how I think about things. Speaking of future episodes, I have got several ideas, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do next, but it'll be probably something along the lines of and what inspires me, as I mentioned. I also want to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of playing. I've kind of developed a real system for preparing for a game, and preparing, yes, mentally and making sure a campaign is set and the adventure set, but also just physically between online tools and paper and books and notebooks and all that stuff. Something I've kind of evolved into that works really well for me, and I want to talk about it, talk about why that might be useful and interesting to some of you. I hope so. Of course, would love to talk about my campaign, how it got here. It's gone through a lot of iterative changes over the years. I think that would be interesting, I hope, and maybe inspiring for some of you out there. You know, I've been in the hobby for a long time, and even though we didn't really play a lot of hours, we have a lot of different systems and books that we dabbled in, my friends and I. And I still have a lot of that stuff. And so I think I would really like to share that with you and kind of show you what it was about, what it seemed like, what it felt like to me at the time, what it meant to me, what is interesting about it now, how it could either inform or inspire current games. And then last but not least, I think about this stuff a lot. Listen to a lot of podcasts, do a moderate amount of reading. Who has time to read? No, I do some reading too. I'd like to kind of share some of my analysis. So often I hear people talking about things and I'm like, yeah, that's right. Wait, you missed a whole important thing. So it's those missed whole important things that I would like to share, kind of dig into here. For example, Dungeons and Dragons alignment. You know, there's a reason why it's hung around. Why is that so interesting to people? People who don't even care about the game know about the 9-grid alignment system. And why is that? You know, why is it interesting enough to be a meme? And we can talk about how useful that might or might not be. And then related, but I think a different topic, is playing an evil character as a player character. So I've got thoughts about that. And I think those who I've heard talk about it get some of it right, but miss some really important things that I think I can add to that discussion. Those are just some examples, and then whatever inspires me. We can talk about current products, though I think that's a well-covered topic, so I'm not so sure that I'll get into that a whole lot. I'm gonna wrap it up for now for this episode 0 of Continuing Clockwise. If you see this, please give me feedback. A lot of communities do bring good discussion, so I'll be really would love that. Whatever's on your mind, let me know. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and all those good things so that we can keep this going, and I can figure out what are gonna be the best topics to share with you. And with that, again, I'm Chad, also known as Modern Kutuzov from Continuing Clockwise. Have a great afternoon.